Welcome to Roots of Fear. Today's story is Mirehart family's shadowy 13th birthday. The first thing Dr. Alistair Finch noticed, as the Mirehart boy shuffled into the lamplight, wasn't the pallor of his skin or the quiet fear in his eyes. It was the wall. Or rather, the lack of something upon it. The boy, Elias, moved between the roaring fire and the floral patterned wallpaper, and no dancing silhouette followed him. It was as if the light itself refused to acknowledge his existence. Alistair had been summoned to the Georgia Lowcountry with a letter of such bizarre specificity he'd almost dismissed it as the ravings of a backwoods lunatic. "Our son, Elias, is unwell," it read, in a script as precise and dark as spider's ink. "He approaches his 13th birthday. He does not cast a shadow." This has been the way of the Mirehart line since the first brick of this house was laid. We require a man of science to document the transition. Scientific curiosity, a hefty fee, and a morbid fascination had drawn him into the heart of the sprawling, moss-choked Mirehart estate. The family was old money, the kind that seemed to have grown from the Blackwater swamp itself. Silas Mirehart, the patriarch, was a man of granite features and few words, his own shadow a monstrous, elongated thing that clung to him like a loyal hound. His wife, Lenore, was a wraith in silk, her movements so fluid and silent she seemed to glide rather than walk. And then there were the children. 3 of them. The 2 younger ones, a boy and a girl of perhaps 8 and 10, were like little ghosts, their forms unsettlingly complete in the bright Georgia sun. They played in the garden, their small bodies stark against the green, but the ground beneath them told a different story. It was flat, unbroken by their presence. No shadow. Only Elias, 12 years and 11 months old, was the focus of the family's quiet, simmering dread. "It is a family peculiarity," Dr. Silas explained that first evening, his voice a low rumble as they took port in the library. The air was thick with the smell of old leather and damp. A covenant of sorts. "Our children are unburdened. They are pure, unclaimed by the world's weight. Their souls are their own." "Unclaimed by what?" Alistair asked, his scientific mind reeling. "A shadow is merely an absence of light, a blockage of photons. It has no spiritual bearing." Lenore Mirehart smiled, a thin, bloodless curve of her lips. "You are a modern man, Doctor. We are an old family. Some truths are older than your photons." Elias was a quiet, intelligent boy, with eyes that seemed to see too much. Over the next few days, Alistair tried to engage him, to study him. He used camera lucidors, daguerreotype plates, and every trick of optics he knew. The results were always the same. Elias Mirehart, in any light, cast no umbra, no penumbra. He was a void in the visual field, a living, breathing impossibility. "Does it frighten you?" Alistair asked him one afternoon, as the boy sketched a heron by the swamp's edge. Elias didn't look up. "No. It's normal for me. It's the waiting that's scary." "Waiting for what?" "For my shadow to come," he whispered, his pencil stilling. "It's out there. I can feel it sometimes, in the deep parts of the swamp. It's waiting for my birthday. It's hungry." A cold finger traced its way down Alistair's spine. "That's just a story, Elias. A family superstition." The boy finally met his gaze, and the raw terror in his eyes was far more convincing than any of his father's cryptic pronouncements. "It's not a story, Dr. Finch. It's a debt. And on my birthday, it comes to collect." The eve of Elias's 13th birthday fell with the weight of a shroud. The house, usually a bastion of quiet order, was tense. The servants, a dull lot who seemed as much a part of the estate as the gnarled live oaks, moved with a hushed urgency. Silver was polished to a blinding sheen. Every lamp, every sconce, every candle was lit, until the mansion blazed against the oppressive darkness of the swamp, a lone star in a sea of black. Silas led Elias and a deeply unsettled Alistair to a room in the oldest part of the house, a windowless, circular chamber made of cold, grey stone. It was devoid of furniture, save for a single, high-backed chair placed directly in the centre. On the stone floor around the chair, intricate symbols were carved, a language Alistair did not recognize, looking less like decoration and more like a containment circle. "This is the receiving room," Silas stated, his voice echoing in the hollow space. "It has been thus since my great-great-grandfather's time. The terms of our prosperity are clear. We give the land its due, and the land provides for us." "What due?" Alistair demanded, his scientific detachment crumbling. "You are speaking of a child." "We are speaking of survival, Doctor," Lenore said from the doorway. She held a silver tray bearing a single, crystal glass of dark red wine. "This will help you sleep, Elias. You must be rested for the transition." Elias, trembling, drank the concoction without complaint. His eyes were glazed with a mixture of drugged acceptance and primal fear. As he slumped in the chair, his head lolling, Silas and Lenore retreated, closing a heavy, iron-banded door behind them. Alistair heard the distinct sound of a bolt sliding home. He was locked in. "Mirehart! Open this door," he shouted, pounding on the thick wood. His only answer was the retreating echo of their footsteps. Hours passed. The only light came from a single, large oil lamp hanging from the ceiling, its flame casting a wobbly, uncertain glow. Alistair checked on Elias. The boy was in a deep, unnatural sleep, his chest rising and falling in a slow rhythm. The room was silent, save for the frantic beating of Alistair's own heart. Then, the temperature dropped. It was a sudden, invasive cold that seeped from the stones themselves, frosting the air in Alistair's lungs. The flame of the lamp guttered, shrank, and turned a sickly, bruised purple. And a presence entered the room. It did not come through the door or the walls. It simply coalesced, pulling itself together from the deepest patches of darkness in the corners of the chamber. It was a shape of pure, absolute black, a two-dimensional cutout of nothingness. It had the rough, distorted form of a tall, spindly man, but its edges writhed and bled like ink in water. It had no features, no face, yet Alistair felt its attention fix upon the sleeping boy. This was the dead. This was the hungry thing from the swamp. The shadow moved. It didn't walk, it poured across the floor, a slick of living darkness, flowing over the carved symbols which now glowed with a faint, desperate light. It reached the chair and began to rise, looming over Elias. Alistair, frozen in a terror he had never known possible, could only watch. The shadow leaned over the boy, its form bending. And then, with a slow, deliberate purpose, it began to press itself against him. It wasn't covering him, it was merging. The darkness seeped into the boy's sleeping form, into his skin, his clothes, his very being. Elias's body arched violently, a silent scream tearing from his lips. His eyes flew open, but they were no longer his own. They were pools of the same bottomless black. The process was agonizingly slow. The shadow fed itself into the boy, and as it did, the room grew colder, the purple light dimmer. Alistair felt a pressure in his head, a psychic wail of violation that wasn't his own. Finally, it was over. The last tendril of darkness vanished into Elias's chest. The lamp flickered and returned to its normal, warm glow. The cold receded. Elias sat in the chair, breathing heavily. He looked down at the floor. And there it was. A shadow. His shadow. It stretched out from his feet, long and stark and perfectly ordinary in the lamplight. It was the shadow of a boy. But as Alistair stared, his breath caught in his throat. The shadow was wrong. For a fraction of a second, it didn't mimic the boy's exhausted slouch. It twitched. It seemed to stretch, independently, its head turning slightly as if to look back at him, before snapping back into perfect, unnatural alignment. The bolt on the door slid back. Silas and Lenore entered, their faces masks of serene relief. "It is done," Silas announced, his voice booming in the quiet room. He looked at his son, at the perfectly normal shadow he now cast, and a smile of profound satisfaction spread across his face. "The covenant is fulfilled. The land is satisfied for another generation." Lenore rushed to Elias, hugging him. "My boy. You are whole." Elias looked up at Alistair. His eyes were his own again, brown and fearful. But deep within them, in their very depths, something new and ancient stared out. Something that had been waiting in the swamp for 13 years. "It's inside me now, Dr. Finch," he whispered, so only Alistair could hear. "It's always hungry." Alistair left Mirehart Manor at first light. He refused the generous payment, packed his bags with trembling hands, and fled the oppressive atmosphere of the swamp. He told himself it was mass hysteria, a shared delusion supported by drugs and superstition. He tried to bury the memory of the writhing darkness, the independent twitch of the boy's new shadow, in the rational soil of his mind. But some seeds are too terrible to grow. A year later, a letter found him, forwarded through 3 different addresses. It was from a maid who had served the Mireharts, a woman who had since fled the state. The script was hurried, terrified. "Young Master Elias is changed, Doctor. He is cold. He spends hours staring at the swamp, and his shadow, it does not always follow him. Sometimes it leads. Last week, a hired man from town, a brute who had been causing trouble, was found in the mire. He hadn't simply drowned. The coroner said it looked as if he had been savaged. Torn apart by an animal, but no animal tracks were found. Only the footprints of a boy, leading to and from the body. And beside the boy's footprints, another set. A set of deeper, heavier prints that began and ended in the middle of a patch of dry ground. They were the prints of something that walked on 2 legs, something with long, clawed feet. The same day, Mr. Silas secured a timber contract he had been seeking for a decade. Alistair folded the letter, his hands ice-cold. He understood now. The covenant was not just about receiving a shadow. It was a merger. The family offered their children as vessels for something that lived in the swamp, something dark and powerful that demanded a tithe of blood and terror in exchange for the Mirehart's enduring wealth and influence. The children didn't just gain a shadow on their 13th birthday. They became the host for the family's monstrous patron. He thought of the 2 younger Mirehart children, still shadowless, still pure. He thought of the hungry thing waiting in the swamp, and the thing now living inside Elias. He thought of the cycle, ready to begin anew. And sitting at his desk in his clean, well-lit study, hundreds of miles from that Georgia swamp, Dr. Alistair Finch made a conscious effort never to look too closely at his own shadow again. For in its dark, silent mimicry, he now saw not an absence of light, but a potential for a presence. A presence that, perhaps, was not always his own.